Poker's legendary champions, next generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome, my friends, to another episode of Tactical Tuesday. I am once again joined by John, who's just gotten back from a trip in Vegas for a week. What's up, John?
How you doing? Good. Just getting warmed up for getting a little bit of live cash in before the World Series. Just kind of wanted to make sure that I still liked playing and that I wanted to go during October and November, and yeah, it's been confirmed that I still enjoy playing live poker.
Let's talk about what did you play while you were there?
I played exclusively PLO, which maybe explains why I was having so much fun. I mean, it's just like it almost felt like a vacation, not because the game was soft or anything like that, but it's just because I'm playing a new game and like doing something different from like my everyday grind. I went in like fully expecting to play No Limit, and then I don't know exactly where the trains went off the tracks, but yeah, I ended up in the 4-card game instead, which was a lot of fun.
And originally we were going to break down some hands from the WSOP for this Tactical Tuesday, or historical past WSOPs, but you know, Poker Go, very aggressive with their copyright protection with the WSOP, so we couldn't really find footage or figure out how to make it work. But for those listeners who are planning on going to Vegas in the next month, any updates, any word on the street about how things are going?
No, I think people are just like generally excited, and like there seems to be like a lot of buzz about the World Series. Like everyone's kind of talking about it at the cash tables. People are like asking like, you know, are you going to play this event? Are you guys going to play? Are you going to go? Like, you know, which events are you going to play? That kind of stuff. And, you know, everyone's talking to the dealers and getting hyped up about it. So yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely probably some like pent up demand for the WSOP since it didn't run last year, and there have been like online events running. So I'm sure there are a lot of players who want to play live that have been waiting for this time of year.
I mean, just wanting to interact with other human beings, I think is the real demand. It doesn't really matter in what context, but like, let's talk to people. Let's surround ourselves with other living, breathing human beings. Let's segue into the hands that we're going to break down here from there. What's the theme for today's Tactical Tuesday?
So we're going to talk about river bluff sizing in both of these hands. You know, I think that, well, on every street in No Limit, you have a variety of sizes, or an infinite number of sizes, I guess, technically, that like you can use. And I think there are good reasons and bad reasons for like pretty much every size in most spots. But I think like one spot that comes up a lot, I'm sure for everybody, is like you're on the river, you have a really bad hand, and you need to decide whether to bluff or not. And then once you decide to bluff, you need to decide what size is the best size to bluff and why. And I think there's a lot of reasons for picking like a small size. I think there's a lot of situations that call for like the more standard, you know, 66 to 75% pot size. And then I think that there are a handful of situations that, you know, where overbetting the river is, you know, probably what's preferred. So yeah, we're just going to go over two of the more extreme situations today. One hand from Brad where he decides to go for a very small bluff on the river, and then one hand from me where I do the opposite.
All right. So with that said, we won't say whose hands are which, since you just spoiled the ending here in both of them. So we're starting out with hand number one. We won't spoil it, but it's at 500 No Limit. And John was on vacation playing PLO. So I guess for those with superpowers of discernment, they can realize that this one was me clicking around. I fired up two tables. I can't remember what I was doing. I was like doing some analysis, I think, in hand to note, and just was clicking around. Or maybe I was setting my fantasy football lineup and just jumped in 500 No Limit. It's actually kind of strange this last month of poker to me. I've played like I've played some 200 Zoom. I've played 500 Zoom. I've played 1K. I've played 30-60 heads up and shorthanded. I've played PLO 8 or better. I've played 200 PLO. I've played 500 PLO, and I've played like 30 hands of 1K PLO. I've been all over the map. I think that it's probably related to what you said about being excited about playing live poker, just playing games that are like different than what you're used to.
Right.
But anyway, it's been fun, and I can say definitively that whether you're playing whatever stake, if you're trying to get hands in at about 10 a.m. on a Sunday, like I was, whenever I fired this up, waiting for the Titans to play, not much action at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on a Sunday.
You're like the ultimate rec player or like businessman now. You're just like, you're doing your work and you open up like 2 tables of high stakes no limit on the side and just like, or whatever, like 30-60 limit, like pretty high stakes.
Was the highest limit game they spread on Ignition.
Yeah, the
I
biggest
learned
game
that
on the side. You just do it on the side while you're working. Like that's
well, 500 is still like 500 is mid stakes. It's not
aspired.
500 is just it is what it is. Clicking around. So we're playing heads up 500 no limit. Me and this villain have been playing for a while. They've, it's clear that they have a heads up strategy, which, I'm not going to kind of shy away from battling heads up when it's tough getting games and, whatever. So in this first hand, villain opens 2.5x to $12.50. We've got a 6 and a 5 of different suits. We defend from the big blind. Any thoughts of defending a 6 and 5 of different suits, Sean?
I mean, I don't play heads up or know heads up very well, so I'm gonna assume that it's fine.
Perfect, because I don't play much heads up either, so I'm gonna assume that it's fine as well, and we'll just quietly move on.
Yeah, seems too good. Ooh, definitely fine.
Yeah. So 5-6 off. The flop is Jack of Spades, 4 of Spades, Tray of Clubs. So we flop an open-ended straight draw. You can see John's excitement there because we flopped a straight draw on with a flush draw possible. This is why PLO appeals to you so much. Like you just ooh, I got something. I got a chance to win.
Like my like fascination with blockers on my river bluffs and stuff like that. This is like, I think I found the right game to have that fascination.
Yes, blockers can very much matter in PLO. Yeah. So anyway, we check. Villain like snap bets a quarter pot, which has been their bet size in like the 40 hands that we've played so far. Their C bet size is just what they're doing. They bet $6.25. Any thoughts here, John, this first decision point?
I mean, like the first thing I think of when I see this size is that like, oh, this guy must not be like a super reg on the site because he bets like exact nice round number on the flop. And I'm sure there's been some rake taken out and stuff. So if you wanted to bet a quarter, if you wanted to bet a third or whatever, like it would end up being like $5 and some change. Or $6 and some change. Or excuse me, I guess it's 5 and change if you wanted to bet a quarter. And so like, I mean, you said that this guy's a rag and like his open size seems fine. But like this bet size on the flop immediately just makes me think like, oh, okay, this guy doesn't have hotkeys set up or whatever. It's just not someone who plays all the time.
But he does have hotkeys set up, which was so weird. Like this bet was coming like insta, like every time. And then like the turn bet size would be the I believe his turn bet size was something like $26, and it was like instant as well.
Oh, okay.
Same size every single time. So I don't know exactly what hotkeys set up, but I think there is something going on. But that's neither here nor there, really.
Yeah.
I opt to check raise.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Finish. No, I was just gonna say that, like, okay, assuming that this guy's a reg, like another thing that I would think about is that on Jack 4-3 two-tone versus the big blind, this is a flop. Again, don't know anything about heads up strategy, but like in a 6-max situation, button versus big blind, this is a flop that I would be playing big bet or check on, especially with like the 2 low connected cards that I think are just much better for the big blind's range, or just strengthens a lot of the big blind's defending range in single raise pots. So this is a situation where I'd be going big bet or check and don't really love the small bet with range on the flop, although maybe that's more of a thing when you're playing heads up.
I mean, my strategy is going to be to like check raise a lot of my top pair
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
probably do a lot of like check raise checking with my top pair. I like adding that in my check raise check strategy, and also just check raising these natural type hands like 6 high that has equity.
Yeah.
I think villains probably c betting 100%. I don't think they've passed up a c betting opportunity yet. So we check raised at 29. I think I could have gone a little bit bigger. Like I think I could have gone like 35 ish.
Yeah.
But we check raise to 29, which is like almost 5x villains raise, and they call like pretty quick to my recollection. It was only a few hours ago, but I don't remember thinking anything about it. And so now there's $83 in the pot, and the turn is the Jack of Hearts. So the flop was Jack of Spades, 4 of Spades, Tray of Clubs. The turn is the Jack of Hearts. Top pair, pairs. What do you do after check raising the flop on this card, John?
So after check raising flop on board pairing turns, I generally play I would probably play close to range check on the turn. And play again check raises on the turn. Like one of the, I guess like my explanation for like why I do that is like now the hands that I've check raised on the flop are just like need very, very little protection or actually no protection. Like if I had a set of 4s or set of 3s, like yeah, fine. We, Jack X still definitely has equity versus us, but his flush draws, gut shots, and whatever other straight draws that he might have are just not are just now drawing dead, or probably like very, very close to drawing dead. And so yeah, so like we don't need protection from that range, and like we would actually, I don't know, maybe like prefer that they get an opportunity to like hit a flush or a straight on the river. I think while that is like one consideration, the more important consideration for me is that like now on this board pairing turn, a lot of my draws don't want to bet and get jammed on, or just some other bad situation where like we have a spade draw and we bet big on the turn and then just get jammed on, and like now we're the ones that could be drawing dead or are just like going to be doing very, very poorly against their jamming range. Or even just versus our calling range. Like they're just going to be able to trap with hands that we're drawing dead against like very comfortably if they have a boat or like some strong Jack X that's just never going to fold. So yeah, I think I like playing check raises on the turn again for those reasons.
So I'm right there with you, and I also think one thing that you left out is I think villains are going to stab too often facing turn check. Like I think this is kind of like a strange turn where top pair pairs, I don't think villains should be stabbing as frequently as they do. Like with aces, kings, queens, those hands typically checking back. So I just think population in general is going to stab too often or too inappropriately. So I think that's makes a solid argument for going for another check raise or starting out by checking when villains stab inappropriately.
Interesting. I'm always like scared when I'm in villain spot about getting check raised on the turn again when I face check raise check for some reason. I don't know. It's just like this weird fear that I have in the back of my head that like, oh man, like I could easily get check raised again here. I think probably a big part of it has to do with like my own strategy where like I check raise check the turn and then we'll check raise the turn. So yeah, I don't know. Like I feel like my personal bias would be to understab facing a check on the turn. Just like understab relative to population, understab relative to theory, like whatever, just because I'm scared of getting check raised on the turn again.
Yeah, I think exploitatively check raise check is oftentimes underprotected. And so I think like making a data read, you can probably just stab most of your range profitably versus like what population's typically doing. And I think that's just like an easy trap to fall into in villain's shoes. So anyway, I opt to check, and villain very quickly bets $27.06. And this kind of ties back into the flop. I know we're beating a dead horse at this point, but like this does look like a hotkey setup because they bet it very quickly, 27.06. And I do decide to check raise. I go to 122. Any thoughts on sizing here with my check raise once they bet like 30%?
Well, let's start with the villain first, because I'm curious to hear what you think like they're stabbing, what size you would expect to see them stab the turn with after getting check raised on the flop, and then like what sort of hands you think are acceptable to, or are reasonable to check raise, or excuse me, to stab the turn with.
I would not be stabbing with hardly anything personally.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I would be checking back most everything. So I don't know. I just think this happened very quickly, this turn bet, which just, I don't know. I think they're just stabbing their continuing range on the flop, whatever that looks like. Like,
Gotcha.
so 5-7, 6-7, spade draws, over pairs, probably. Their Jack X, I think that's pretty obvious. Their boats are going to stab. Like, I think those hands sort of make sense, but whatever they decide to continue with on the flop, I just think they're stabbing on the turn.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot of hands. Okay. Yeah. Well, then, like, I think check raising the turn like way more liberally, like especially with this, this type of hand. Although this is not even that crazy of one, I guess, just a clean open ender. Yeah, I think I like that a lot. Especially if you think that they're over stabbing turn.
I think so. And again, I do remember the timing of this bet, and it was like almost instant, which leads me to believe that, like, if they're not thinking about it and it's like almost instant, then they're likely just stabbing everything they have.
Gotcha.
So we decide to check raise to 122, and villain does call. So now there's 327 in the pot, and the river double pairs the boards. So the river's a 4. The final board is Jack, Jack, 4, 4, 3. We've got a 5 and a 6 of different suits. So we do have 6 high, and that's nice. And to tie into the theme of this Tactical Tuesday, what sizing? I guess the first question is, are you betting the river? And then the second question is, what sizing would you choose?
So yes, I think this is a spot where I would be very happy to bluff the river. Big part of it is that we only have 6 high and no showdown. I think another big part of it is that there are better hands that we can fold out. And they're
because we have 6 high.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, sometimes, like, I don't know. Sometimes I get to the river with 6 high, and I'm like, I don't know, like, if there are better hands that my opponent gets to the villain, like, that my villain opponent gets to the river with in this way that, like, I can like reasonably fold out. But here, like, it's very easy to see that they can have flush draws. They can have 5-7, ace deuce, ace 5. I don't know, maybe even like a hand like ace 3 that like got counterfeited or something like that. Maybe a hand like pocket 7s or 6s is going to fold to like a big bet on the river. But there's, very clearly hands that we can easily see that we can fold out that are better than ours, and we have no showdown. And I think those two things together make it a pretty enticing spot to go for a bluff. Also, I guess just like added bonus, like we've repped some really, really strong hands by going check raise on the flop, check raise on the turn. So our range is definitely going to include some boats and quads types hands on this run out. So we're not unprotected, like, in terms of the value region of our range. So then, like, the only question for me left is like, what size is best to bluff on the river? And I think that's a big question here is do we rip? Do we bet small? Do we bet normal?
Well, I think rip and small are pretty much our only 2 options. There's 385 left. The pot's 327. Like, hard to find like a 70% size there.
Okay. All right. So I think that's like one good way to like narrow down our
yeah, we went from infinite. Now we have 2.
Yeah.
We have like a small bet and a jam.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, I can tell you what I was thinking when choosing the size. And I thought villain would have a lot of they have Jack X in their range. Like, this is very clear, right? So a lot of times when I jam, I get snapped by just their boats, right?
Yep.
Which is very reasonable. I also thought they had, like you said, they have a lot of hands, straight draws, flush draws, maybe small pocket pairs that they may end up finding a fold versus a small bet. They're also going to fold all those hands to a big bet too, probably. But I didn't know if, I guess the biggest question here is like aces, kings, queens, 10s, 9s, 8s. I don't know if they fold to a jam or a small bet. And that's really, I think, what the sizing hinges on here. Once the straight draws brick, once a flush draws brick, like, do these pocket pairs fold to a rip? I don't know. And I was not very confident that they would, playing heads up. So because of that, I just decided to use the small bet to target all their busted flush draws and stuff like that.
Right. So let me just try to like rephrase your logic on the river real quick. So like there's this target of hands that's like miss draws and ace highs and miss flush draws and straight draws and ace highs that are going to fold regardless of what size you bet. on the river, basically.
Mhm.
And then there's this other category of hands that's like slightly stronger than that, which is like pocket pairs, over pairs, and then the boats that, well, okay, we'll leave the boats out. But there's a stronger category of hand that's pocket pairs that we don't know if we get folds from that region of their range when we jam. We never get folds from the Jack X and the 4X, so we don't even have to worry about that part of the range. And when we don't know that we're getting extra folds by risking like our entire stack on the river, then like that's a spot where you think it's reasonable to just go for the small size and fold out like a pretty meaty portion of the range that's just going to snap fold to any bet. And when you're questionable about whether like the extra $344 gets you anything, probably lean away from using that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And that's well said. And like, obviously if they jam, then, I like the small bet from an efficiency standpoint here, because if villain jams, they're not bluffing here. They pretty much always have a boat. They did tank though. They tanked down and ended up folding. And I have no idea what they ended up folding. Possibly like, a king high flush draw or something like that, where they're getting suspicious, but then probably start going in their mind something like, well, I've got like the cards that I want them to have, so that's like not good for me,
Yeah, that would go through my mind. The other thing that would go through my mind, like this bluff would work on me for sure, because I just don't give people credit for being able to bluff the small size on the river.
I know.
Like I'm just like,
I know you don't.
Like everyone just value bets for this size on the river. Like I call the spot and they just show up with like Jack X or 4X like every single time. So I'm just gonna
live it on the edge, man.
Exploit it a fold. Yeah. I think that's why finding these like small bluff spots on the river, small size bluff spots on the river are like really exciting. And like, I don't know, they just seeing that it works, like it gets through is pretty cool for me, which is bad. It's good and bad, because I'm just gonna call more now and then lose a lot more and just like go back into the cycle of like, nobody bluffs this size except for Brad. So.
And he's only playing 1,000 hands a month, so like what are the odds that you run into, right? I don't know what villain had, because like I said, I don't have, it hasn't been 24 or 48 hours yet. This happened only like 8 hours ago, so we don't know what villain folded yet. Maybe we'll give an update next week if we remember.
No, by the time we post this episode, they'll be out.
Yeah, what are we gonna do, like re-record?
No, we'll just put it in the description. Or I mean, I guess that would be a spoiler, but I don't know. We could put it somewhere. Put it in the comments on Wednesday or something.
Okay, put it in the comments on Wednesday. We'll see. John, I'll leave that up to you. That can be your job. So go to YouTube,
social media manager.
Yeah, youtube.com/chasing poker greatness. Check out Tactical Tuesday if you're listening to this on the podcast, and we'll have the updated information for you in the next couple of days.
Yeah.
So
probably folded something better than 6 high though. So
I mean,
feel good about that.
Yeah, I guess like they got deuces or tray 5 suited. I guess those are like the two, maybe deuce tray suited that I beat. John, so you have a hand after this. I have no earthly idea what happens in your hand. So why don't you set this hand up before we go to the break?
It's actually not that exciting until the river, so there isn't much to set up. It's a single raise pot button versus big blind. I think this is good. We'll go into a hand like where you're completely cold, like you haven't seen anything. We'll get your total just raw first impressions without any previous thought, and we'll see what you say. And it's not like some crazy hand or anything like that. So it's not like you're gonna, I don't know. It's not like you're gonna want to open up a solver or something for this spot, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're really good at building the hand up, but then right there at the end you just fell completely apart. Stick around after the break for John's hand.
Before I got Nuffle, I had run into a lot of donk bets. And I think once you play a certain amount of hands, there's something wrong with our opponent's strategies, but you don't know how to play to maximize EV against it. And it's very frustrating. I looked at the document and I couldn't believe that I paid money for it. I actually doubted that it could provide value because it was so brief. But since then, it's repaid me just over and over and over again. And it's one of the most consistent moneymakers built into my strategy that sheds light on just how bad your opponents are. And it took me 20 minutes to perfect it. And it's just amazing. Yeah, I'm speechless. It's just that good. the simplicity of it is part of it being a masterpiece.
All right. Welcome back from the break. John, we have this beautiful king of spades, four of spades, just loaded up, rip roaring, ready to rock. So why don't you start breaking down the action?
Yeah. So hand starts out with action being folded to the button. Button. I mean, he has a lot of money. He has 2,700. So starts a hand with 270 big blinds, but his stats over 50 hands look a little bit lacking. He's playing 27-18-6. It's a pretty big gap, the 27-18 between PFIP, VPIP, and PFR. I don't know what to make of him. I don't really have a like the rest of the hand doesn't really give me a strong opinion of whether he's a reg or a fish as well. I don't know. Do you have like a way that you proceed against players like this, Brad? Like 50 hands, his stats look not amazing, but
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I guess they're opening 3x on the button. I don't know if that says anything. I know that like there are regs that do that. I think typically regs tend to open smaller. Who knows? I mean, 27-18-6, like I would just sort of assume that they're a reg until sort of something tells me otherwise.
Okay. Yeah, I'm comfortable. I usually do that too. Like that seems like the safest way to play against someone is just assume that they're decent and whatever until they prove otherwise. 27-18-6 over 15 hands. I think that would get to the point. That's starting to get to the point where I'm like, yeah, he's just probably like a weaker reg, but not some fish that's just punting all the time. Actually, this whole table looks pretty good. 26-11 on the bottom and 28-13 on the top.
Yeah. So for the YouTube listener and the podcast listener, by the way, just want to say this for the record that when I was loading this hand in my browser, John said, just get me in the button. Those are the only two people that matter. And then we get into the video and you're just automatically talking about HUD stats that are off screen that nobody can see. So well done, John. Well done.
Yeah.
You decide to call with your king and your four playing, like 1,500 effective.
Yep. So I start the hand with about 150 big blinds. And we see a flop of queen, jack 10 with two hearts and spade. I have king 4 of spades, so flop an open ender and a backdoor spades draw. I don't play very many leads, and but even if I did, I don't think this is going to be one of the flops. I don't think a triple Broadway flop is going to be one that I lead as the caller. I'm sure Brad agrees with that. This flop actually goes check, which I think makes a lot of sense. I mean, maybe range betting this board is actually completely fine, considering just like the massive advantage the pre-flop raiser or the villain on the button in this case is going to have on this flop. But I think what I would do is probably play big bet check mostly on this flop, and then So I think seeing the check on the swap isn't.
Are there any boards that
surprising?
Are there any boards that you're not playing a big bet check strategy on, John?
Yeah, Jack 3-3 rainbow.
The one board. The one board, Jack 3-3 rainbow. So you got big bet or check here. My preference would be to bet as the pre-flop raiser, especially at this depth. Just we've got such a range advantage here that like any of my ace-x wants to bet. Just a lot of hands want to bet. So I would start out by betting if I were villain, but this villain does opt to go ahead and check back. And there's 65 whole dollars in the pot, and the turn pairs the 10. So the flop was queen jack 10 with the queen 10 of hearts. The turn is the 10 of spades. So the jack and the 10 of spades are now on the board, and John has a king high flush draw with, an open ender. So tell me about your decision here, John.
I think like the first thing that I think about in these spots is what type of range I can assign the button now that he's checked back the flop. I think his range is going to be quite a bit of jack X, quite a bit of 10X, some weaker queen X that it's not comfortable going for through streets. A lot of pocket pairs, maybe all the pocket pairs. Although maybe he starts turning like deuces through fives into a bluff or something like that. But like definitely hands like nines and eights, I think are going to be checking the flop. And then a lot of ace highs, I think, are going to be in there as well. Maybe like ace high spades, maybe a hand like ace 9 or a hand like ace 10, ace jack. Find checkbacks on the flop as well. So I think the 10 is sort of maybe it's like slightly better for his range, given that like he's probably checking back almost all his 10x that aren't like 2 pair or like set plus. So
Well,
maybe slightly better for him, but also not a terrible card for me. Yeah.
let's dive into that, because I think like, so combinatorically speaking, your range, once you defend in the big blind, like you have, you're defending what percentage of your range?
Like including 4 bets, or excuse me, including 3 bets.
No, just a single raise pot. Like villain opens button, you call from the big blind.
Yeah, probably like close to 25.
All right, so 25% of your range, and now villain's open range on the button is going to be something like 40 to 50%, right?
Yeah, I think 40, mid 40s makes sense.
Right. So then on the flop, they can better check, and either option that they take will basically splits their range. So if they bet or if they check, it splits their range one way or the other. And so now the question is like, versus this split range, once they check back the flop, is this 10 better for them and they're like, probably 20% of hands that they have once they check back, or your 25% that you have in full because you just defended, and you haven't really taken like any action yet that splits your range at all. So to me, the 10 is likely better for them than it is for us, just because we have pure 25% of our defense range when we call pre-flop. And now they've chosen a specific portion of their range to check back on, which, like you said, is going to include a lot of queens, a lot of jacks, a lot of tens. And so that just means to me that like this card feels like it's better for them than us.
Okay. Yeah. I think I said it was a little bit better. Maybe it's way better. Another thing that like adds to your argument, I think, is that I 3-bet the bottom of my suited 10x range. Like my 10-6 suited is going to get 3-bet facing a button open. So like I don't even have like as many 10, like I'm sure the button's opening hands like 10-5 suited, 10-6 suited, 10-7 suited, and I just like don't have those bottom suited combos because I 3-bet them pre. So yeah, I think that just kind of strengthens your argument for why the 10 on the turn is better for the button than it is for me.
Yeah. So with that said, what do we do?
I do turn a flush draw, by the way, for the YouTube listeners. So the board is now queen, jack, 10-10 with 2 spades. I have king 4 spades, an open ender, and a flush draw. I think there's a lot of ways.
The YouTube listener.
Oh, yeah.
The YouTube viewer can see it. It's the podcast listener that can't. But yeah, you do have a flush draw.
Yeah. I think this turn just situation is like there's a million ways I can go here. Like I think I can overbet turn. I think I can just bet a slightly more standard size, which is what I go for. Here, I can go for a check raise with this hand. I don't know. There's just so many options here that I almost feel like I have too many good options to pick from. Like this, just the spot with this hand just feels, I don't know, like I could go a lot of different ways. You have one of those.
I think the way that the way that you went, I think I like maybe the least.
Oh, really? So I bet half pot for the
half
podcast listener.
Yeah, like you bet half pot, and like you said, I think like overbet, I think is pretty nice with your exact hand. I think it fits well in your range. If you have like some 10x, you just want to polarize, or like 8-9 off, king 9 maybe, something like that, or your 10x. I think overbet makes polarizing with an overbet makes a lot of sense, considering how we've just sort of broken down villain's flop check back range, including a lot of showdown equity hands that like facing a half pot size bet is like just the no-brainer of no-brainer calls on the turn.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I think another thing to add to like why maybe overbetting turn here is just even better than just like a normal or a more standard situation where the flop goes check is that there's so many draws on this turn. Like this board is so wet. It's queen jack 10-10 with 2 flush draws that like I'm gonna have no problem repping bluffs or finding natural bluffs to overbet on this river. So like if I do just want to play a strategy where I overbet my 10x and my straights, it's like no problem finding hands like king 4 of spades that kind of go along with that to create a bluffing region.
Yeah, and I mean I think check raise is probably okay too, because I think like I like check raising because I think 10s will naturally check raise here, because when we were breaking down villain's range, like if we have a 10, well, that's going to remove a lot of the 10x's that they're going to have in their range. And so like, I just think that like queen X or jack X may stab the turn, and 10s may get a nice check raise in here. And I think it looks natural. It doesn't look kind of forced. And so I think it has a lot of credibility when we do check raise on this specific turn.
Gotcha. Okay, so I don't know. Make a decision. Check raise or overbet.
Either one. I think like
Oh, that doesn't matter.
Either one for me. Both are good. I don't love the half pot
Okay.
size bet though. This is the one
Okay.
that I don't like.
Okay. So you would have gone. Yeah. So I guess I'll like in the future I'll probably go like I don't know 80 or something on the turn.
Yeah, I mean, I think like if villain's checking back a bunch of showdown driven hands, then like we certainly want to go super polar when with our range, right?
Okay.
The river's a tray of clubs, and there's 127 in the pot, and given the build up in the last hand and what we talked about, different sizings and this situation, I've got to imagine the old 30% ball on this river. That missile probably gonna have to holster that one.
I used that one up on the turn. I saved the big boy for the river.
Yeah. This spot, this ain't a small boy spot. This is an atomic bomb type situation spot.
All right. So yeah, let's explain like or why is this a spot where like going small is just in your mind out of the question, and you think that if you're going to bluff this river that you have to go huge?
Because I think villain has a high concentration of showdown driven hands. In my spot, villain had a high concentration of possible busted flush draws and possible bluffs. In your spot, well, you have one of the major flush draws, and then secondarily, if they have like nut hearts, they're just going to be betting flop like almost always. So like they just don't have as many busted draws in this situation. So they have a high density of like bluff catchers. And because they have a high density of bluff catchers, we certainly don't want to give those bluff catchers a great price.
Yeah. I think that, yeah, all that makes a lot of sense. I think to add on to that, like in your hand, it's a situation where when after you go for the double check raise, you are probably perceived to be under bluffing the river. When you check raise flop, check raise turn, and bet the river, I think I would certainly just be under bluffing. I'd be both perceived to be under bluffing and probably wouldn't have enough bluffs in that spot. And I think in those situations where like you don't have enough bluffs and you are also pretty sure that your opponent is going to perceive you to not have very many bluffs. I think going small in the river makes a lot of sense because you're going to have to go small with your value, or you're going to, it's going to be pretty easy to go small with your value. So kind of mixing in a small number of bluffs in with, your Jack X that just really wants to get called in that spot makes a lot of sense. This is like the opposite situation. Like you said, like I'm just going to be perceived to have an infinite number of missed draws and whatever's like on the 3 of clubs river after probing the turn on a double flush draw 3 straight board. Yeah. And like you said, like that played more into my reasoning for going huge on the river, more so than like, oh, the concentration of like showdown bound hands that the button has, like, oh, we just said that he has a lot of Jack X and like a bunch of 10x in the spot, and like, yeah, those hands are just never going to fold to a small bet on the river once 10 million draws break out, which is why I decided to go for I think 125% pot here. I don't know. I mean, this is like pretty small, right? As far as river bluffs go in this situation.
Yeah, I think you could have gone 2x. And for the podcast listener, the river's a tray of clubs. So the board's queen, 10, jack, 10 tray. John has king and a 4 of spades. So he's got a nice little king high with a 4 kicker. And you bet 155 into 127 here. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't think this is super credible personally. I would call with a jack, but I don't know. That's me.
Why what makes it not credible?
Your size on the turn.
Oh.
I just think your 10x, your straights tend to go like 70 or 90% pot on the turn. It's a really funky looking like half pot overbet like sizing scheme there. It's just like, I don't know. It just doesn't reek of really good hands to me. Like, why, if you have a straight or 10x, like why wouldn't you just bet 90% on the turn and then choose a really large sizing on the river as well?
Gotcha. Yeah. I think that could definitely be something that I should change up. Or who knows? Maybe I can just start betting some really strong hands on the turn for a smaller size.
Yeah, maybe so. I think you also have a lot of natural bluffs like ace 9, ace X, just random stabs that you stab the turn with, 7, 8, who knows? Like I think that you've got a lot of random type hands that can choose to bluff the river, and It's hard for you to have like basically when I say that I don't think it's super credible, the small sizing on the turn to me eliminates like it tells me a couple of things. Firstly, if you bet half pot, you have multiple sizings. I just can't imagine you bet your whole range at half pot there. That just doesn't really. That's a story I'm just not buying.
Okay.
And so like if you're going to choose the big size, I think that you're going to choose a lot of your stronger hands for the big size, but maybe you choose half and you insert half in your half pot size. Like either way, your half pot size just gets more bluff heavy, and that just gives you a lot more hands to bluff with on the river.
Gotcha.
And we also have some removal because of your two different sizes on the turn that I think, yeah, we can remove your value and you've got a lot of bluffs. So like, okay, whatever, I'm just going to call.
Gotcha. Okay. So, all right. Actually, like, I like that logic a lot. I think like what I should take away from that logic is that like the things that I was saying on the river for why I should overbet the river are the same reasons why I should bet bigger on the turn, right? And yeah, so I should have just like kept that logic like one straight earlier and just been like, hey, I'm only probably betting really strong hands like straights and 10x on the turn. And so if that's the case, then like, yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, what do you size if you have a hand like 9-10 or king 10 off or ace 10 off?
I think I have pot with range on the turn when I probe. Like that's just been like one of the simplifications that I've made to like my turn probe strategy. It's not particularly interesting to go into why, but like, yeah. So I like that would just kind of be my go-to size on the turn. And then I just like I did here, like do some weird range splitting stuff on the river, size splitting stuff on the river.
I think you may need to go into that simplification because it may be an oversimplification on boards that you want to polarize. Like
like this one exactly. Like I agree. Like I should just go bigger with my 10 and like a hand like king 4 of spades. Like it just wants to bet bigger on the turn and then just do the same overbet thing on the river. Yeah, it's like it makes no difference. It actually just makes way more sense on the turn than what I did. So yeah, I've been converted to
good. That's why we do these Tactical Tuesdays, right?
For my education.
you do it for the the weekly extra coaching, the bonus coaching session. But cool, yeah. What happens in this hand? I don't even know. Haven't seen the result.
I think you can play the rest of the thing. You can see the video.
They fold.
Just play it. Just keep playing it.
Yeah, they folded jack.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that you would never fold the jack versus that line and this guy.
I wouldn't, but I mean, to be fair, I don't fold a ton anyway. But I think I mean, I'm one of those. I'm the type of player that is always looking for any excuse to find for me to bluff catch. Like that's just like how I'm made as a human being. Is like, can I find any flaw in this story that you're telling me that will allow me to call off more on money. The river? Because I always want to call more on the river. That's just sort of biologically how I'm made. But yeah, I mean, I think that like you're probably folding out Jack X from most players, to be honest.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, I wonder if he gets suspicious when he sees overbet on the turn, overbet on the river, and like calls with Jack X slightly more, or like does this ever for some reason look more credible than the overbet? Probably not, honestly. Like, also like that's I don't know. I don't think that's a good question. Like, it's just so easy to bet. It's just like so good to be able to bet bigger with your 10x and your straights on the turn. That I think you're right. Yeah,
for sure. Well, nice hand and nice Tactical Tuesday. Welcome back from your adventures in PLO. For the podcast listener, don't worry, we're not going to be breaking down any PLO hands on Tactical Tuesday anytime in the near future. Like, if it's hard enough to keep up in No Limit Hold'em, my God, could you imagine a podcast trying to break down PLO hands? That would be just a freaking nightmare. John, it's been great. And for the podcast listener and the YouTube listener, we still got free Nuffle going on. Little Nuffler there in the bottom left hand of your screen. Sign up, make a new Bovada account, and you get Nuffle for free if you click my link and send me confirmation of your deposit. And yes, I do make affiliate money, so that's the bribe. And John, you got anything left to add before we close down shop?
No, I really like this episode of Tactical Tuesday. I think we should do something like the structure more often, I think. But yeah, that's it for me. So see you next week.
See y'all next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter. Join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter at CPG Podcast.